Welcome to the Voice of Retail podcast. My name is Michael LeBlanc, and I am your host. This podcast is produced in conjunction with Retail Council of Canada. Silk & Snow's co-founder and CEO, Albert Chow, returns to the Voice of Retail to discuss the company's remarkable transition from a digital-first brand with now a major physical retail expansion. With 14 store openings on the horizon for 2025, Albert shares insights on supply chain strategy, local sourcing, customer experience, and the evolving retail landscape. Albert, welcome back to the Voice of Retail podcast. How are you?
Hey, Michael. Thanks for having me back. I'm good. Very busy, but very good.
I know. That's what brings us together here on the mic. Now, I was checking the last time you and I spoke was April. And, from small seeds, big trees grow, basically, for you guys. So it's been great. So thanks again for taking some time to join me on the mic. We shouldn't assume everybody else who's listening today heard our first episode. So tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do for a living, and about your brand.
So my name is Albert Chow. I am the founder of Silk & Snow, which is a retailer of thoughtfully made sleep essentials. And I think the last time we spoke, we were actually on our journey to launching our first ever bricks and mortar store at Ottawa as really a test of combining a Silk & Snow retail experience physically with a sleep country traditional store. And a year has gone by. We've learned a ton. And we've been able to activate two more experiences in in Edmonton and Laval, and it's been great. We've gotten a very great reception from our customers, and we've been really pleased with the results.
Oh, fantastic! Now, tell everybody about your brand architecture, because I think it was new news when we first spoke, your relationship with Sleep Country. Talk about that just so we kind of ground everybody in how all this.
So we started as a digitally native brand of thoughtfully made sleep essentials in 2017. And we kind of grew as an online brand like a lot of brands do these days. We went through the pandemic, starting in the early days as a mattress-in-a-box retailer. So we really rode that wave of this particular category going online. One of the interesting facts about us is that we grew at a very modest rate during that period of the first 3 years of our business. But where we really found our stride was when we started to kind of differentiate from the market and expand into other categories. One thing that our brand stands for is the transparency and the conscious manufacturing behind every one of our products. So as an example, the mattress, we actually made the mattress entirely locally within our Toronto market. All the components were sourced very locally, like within a 50-kilometer radius, where we were sourcing the coils, the foam, the fabric. And we really took that process and that DNA to expand into other product categories that were very much within the sleep space. So over the next few years of our journey, in 2021 to 2023, we expanded into bedding and furniture. And I think that's where we really found our stride as a business. I think our brand messaging, our thoughtfulness, and our transparency and the closeness to the supply chain really resonated with the customer. And we have a very unique aesthetic. We like to think that we're not selling products, we're selling the entire space, such as the bedroom. And a lot of customers, when they have a Silk & Snow experience, they're really looking to outfit their entire space and not just fill a particular product need. So that was part of our journey before we partnered with Sleep Country. In 2023, Sleep Country formally partnered together with Silk & Snow. And we one of the thoughts of partnering with a partner like Sleep Country, where they were very, very, very big in their retail bricks and mortar footprint, is that they really knew the physical retail channel, and we really knew the digital channel. But we'd like to think that for Silk & Snow, we've been growing in spite of having that tactile physical retail experience. So we really thought of them as strategic partners, and when we decided to work with them, we wanted to undertake kind of a test and really investment in growing the physical channel. So as I mentioned earlier, we started with the Ottawa store as an experiment in 2023 of November. And it's been a little over a year, and the results have been fantastic. It's been one of the best performing stores for the Sleep Country Network, and the results for Silk and Snow have been fantastic. We've had a fantastic reception from our customers. And so a year later, we expanded that test to Edmonton and also to a smaller activation within the Laval market. And both, they're about 2 months, 3 months old at this point.
What a great region Laval is, eh? Right? Like when I take people on tours in Montreal, there's just this big cluster of retail up in Laval. It's a little unexpected, but it's pretty real, right?
Yeah, and they're a very, very loyal market to really homegrown retailers. So it's been an interesting market and another data point for us in terms of just testing geographically what our customers are really looking for.
Can I pull on the thread of your product there for a little bit, so to speak? You get what I did there, right? Pull on your thread. When you talk about locally made, there's a lot of products that are difficult to source in Canada. How do you see yourself, or how do you intend to position yourself? I mean, these are energetic times around country of origin and where you find things. And I think there's local, so to speak, broadly is having a moment. It may have a long moment. It may have an hour, but you were describing how you sourced a lot of your components in Canada, in Ontario. Where do you sit today? You probably source from around the world, but just give us what's your perspective and what's your view on that?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of discussion around supply chain and tariffs and just our relationship with our neighbors south of the border. And I'd like to think that for Silk and Snow, we were ahead of the curve. It was just part of our brand DNA to source locally. And we've done a lot of the heavy lifting in 2017, where it was hard to really manufacture a mattress that was made of 100% local supply chain. And that was fairly unique at the time when we launched. And I really like to think that that was always a part of our brand DNA, and the market is just now coming to us. It's fantastic that a lot of consumers are now looking for buying Canadian first and looking at Canadian owned and operated companies as their first choice, and particularly Canadian made products. But I think the uniqueness in our business model is that that's where we originated. And as we expanded the supply chain, we weren't trying to get into the race of the cheapest products sourced in the cheapest manner. For us, we were really after quality and an elevated experience. And usually that led to very different countries of origin. So our bedding, for example, we make in Portugal, which is tariff friendly, whether it's going to Canada or to our US customers in the US. I guess we've been fortunate when we start from kind of evaluating the best manufacturer, and then usually it's very old family run heritage businesses. And so our bedding manufacturer happens to be based in Portugal and in a very traditional region that's very good at producing these type of products. And when we looked at it, we looked at each country's trade agreements, and the trade agreement between Portugal and the US is just the same as the trade agreement with Canada, which is it's duty free. So it was convenient for us when these type of topics are kind of top of mind, but I don't know if we deliberately navigated that intelligently. I wish we could say we did.
Well, I think there's more navigating to happen, but we'll leave that for another day. Now let's talk about the role of physical stores. I mean, as a digital native vertical brand, do you see the stores as, when you evaluate your stores, you've chosen some markets, Edmonton, Laval, we're going to talk about a big expansion. Are you evaluating them purely on the wall-to-wall sales per square foot? Do you have other metrics like growing digital sales by, in other words, thinking of stores as a marketing vehicle for the entire brand. Tell me, just open the hood there and tell me how you think about the role of physical stores strategically in your business.
Yeah, I think the way we think about it is every customer's journey starts in very different ways. Right now, we've been very much catering to the customer journey where it starts digital and then it finishes digital. But I really think the digital penetration of our categories like mattresses, bedding, and home goods is probably 10% in and around. And so we're not capturing a large part of the market and really being where a large part of our consumer base is. So I like to think that over the years, we've kind of grown as a brand digitally native, in spite of really having that physical and tactile environment. Part of our expansion is really to capture the markets where we're already doing well in digitally, and also being in a market that is underserved. So in our categories, I think there's a lot of options for mattresses, but bedding and furniture, when you kind of get into more the mid-market, upper market of these categories, you're pretty limited. And we've been fortunate that a lot of those options too are American, and a lot of our customers are being more conscious about who they're buying from. I think our expansions and our plan to open another 15 stores is really related to the success we've seen as we activated experiences within Canada. And we found that it's been accretive to the business. In addition to how we're doing on the online side, we've been able to activate a new segment of customers who might want to start their journey looking at our brand digitally or finding our brand digitally, but they do want to come into the store. They want to touch and feel the products, and they want to compare colors and really see the sturdiness of some of the home goods that we sell.
Now, you said, let's talk about the cities you're going into. I don't think typically of cities like Vancouver, Calgary, Toronto as underserved, but you find that they're underserved in your category at your level. Is that, and I guess it's a roundabout way of 14 markets. Some you're going to China choose because they're just the major Canadian markets. But how did you kind of cherry pick your way through, even down to location? Toronto, big city, you can go in a lot of different places. How do you think about that? Turning your mind to thinking about being a physical retail. I always find for digitally native executives is like, hey, this is a whole new skill set I need to learn. How did you learn it, and how did you pick where your stores are going?
Yeah, we've always tried to stay away from the lower part of the market, and so we like to think that a lot of the products that we curate as an experience is in the mid to upper market. So I never think of us competing with a lot of the marketplaces or big box retailers, and it's more the specialty retailers. And for us, if our customers or the listeners know our brand, they'll know that there's a very unique aesthetic and cohesiveness with all of our products. So when you kind of narrow it to that set, there is a couple of retailers that I could think of that come off the top of my head where I know other customers compare us to. And when I map it back to a lot of the cities we're expanding in, yes, it's true, like probably Toronto and Vancouver and Montreal, there's quite a bit of options, just like any other category in retail. But when you move down to some of the more medium-sized markets, especially in larger cities within Canada, there starts to be less options that are comparable. So you might get some of the more commodity retailers where, they do sell low-end sheets and furniture, but they definitely don't have the options that Silk and Snow offers.
So you've announced this expansion, something like 14 stores. Over what course of period is that? And you've probably got some firmed up and some still in the works. But where are you going? And tell us about how you're thinking about choosing those cities and where you're going to be located.
We're very, very excited about our retail expansion. Our first 3 stores really proved that there is a market for this, and we've tested this model in larger cities and mid markets. So we're confident that the pathway is another stores. I think the goal is to have this completed by the end of the year, but at this point, this is our best guess of the plan. But I can say that we've done well in Canada in all markets. So some of the plans that are going to be unfolding within the next 3 to 6 months are cities like Quebec City, Ancaster, Sainte Foy in Quebec, Vancouver, and even Sherway Gardens within Toronto. We're looking at a few more locations within BC that we're currently negotiating, but there is a strong intent to have that as a part of the plan. We've also got a couple of really exciting locations within the Greater Toronto area, and we've also got a location in Saskatchewan.
Wow, very exciting. Now, do you tend to have these as part of, you mentioned Sherway, which is down the block from me. Are they mostly in mall? Do you like malls as a value proposition to where your brand lives, standalone? Do you have a perspective on one versus the other at all as you guys think about this?
Yeah, we tend to see very different behavior between malls and I guess high street stores. For malls, I would say the traffic is fantastic. The exposure for the brand, the elevation of the brand, especially a property like Sherway, is just really in line with our brand identity. So I think those things all matter. In terms of like the customer experience and behavior, we do see very different things. Like I think in malls, it's a lot more high volume transactional. So I'm probably saying the obvious, but smaller basket items, cash and carry, they tend to do a lot better. And that really plays into a lot of the assortment that we have at Silk & Snow, which is very different than a lot of others in the sleep space. Nice. And then when we look at more high street stores, they're more of a destination. There's a need for more broadness in terms of the product assortment and being able to make decisions on the entire space and larger pieces like furniture and mattresses. So I guess tactically, they all serve a purpose, but they're for very different reasons. And even geographically, we find that there's different behavior depending on the market.
Right on. Now, I'm going to change tacks a little bit. I've been retail marketing for a long time. And, I was with Hudson's Bay, and I remember this debate literally decades ago, that being Canadian, it should kind of matter, but it doesn't really as a retailer or as a brand. That may be changing now. I mean, you've mentioned it a couple of times, and we're certainly seeing it in this high energy environment. How are you guys and your team thinking around the table about that at one point being a Canadian brand was good, but it wasn't a game changer? Do you think that's evolving? And like, what are you hearing from the customers? And I know you've always, you started local, so that was always a very strong value proposition. You think it's going to get stronger, or you think this is a moment of time? We're all trying to figure this out, so I'm not sure you're going to have any answers to any of this, but what are you thinking?
The view of the customer has changed and what it means to be a Canadian retailer. So you mentioned an example of the Bay. I think even ownership structure, a lot of these, the retailers, they're consolidating, they're being bought up by US private equity. So even if they've had Canadian heritage, they're not quite Canadian owned and operated and creating Canadian jobs. So I think those elements matter more. For Sleep Country and Silk & Snow, we take a lot of pride in being 100% Canadian owned and operated through our growth, creating a ton of Canadian jobs. But I think for our brand, I think I'd take even more pride in that. Not only are we growing in Canada, but we're also growing in the US, and we're one of the few sleep retailers that are carving out our market within the US that have Canadian origins. And I'd like to think, like, in terms of some of our best, Canada's best exports, a lot of people, what comes to mind is natural resources. But for me, I think about all the great Canadian retail brands that have been able to grow their market way outside of Canada. And that includes a lot of high-end fashion retailers that include like Lululemon, Aritzia, Canada Goose, where they're actually tastemakers and trendsetters. And I'd like to think that that's a large part of why Silk and Snow is growing and growing outside of Canada. And I think when we think about kind of the competitive landscape and kind of the patriotism that's bubbling up, I take just as much pride being a Canadian owned and operated retailer that's growing and giving Canadians more Canadian options amongst a number of U.S. retailers, but also winning on the U.S. side and being able to grow our business and our brand into the U.S. market.
Wow, that's fantastic. You get to butter your bread on both sides, as my mother used to say. You both you win here, and you can win in a very competitive U.S. market. I was just in the new Aritzia, their latest flagship store in Chicago. What a store! And you're absolutely right.
Yeah, fantastic.
It's a fantastic store. They were saying that 40% of their new customers in America come from their stores, which kind of gets back to why I was asking you about the role of stores. And they found it's just a new customer generator. You know, for an unknown brand, they come and experience you and go, "Wow, this is great stuff," and you know, beautiful things happen after that. Let's turn our mind a little bit to the future. So, you know, what does success look like for you in the next 5 years? You've had geometric growth. You've struck the right partnerships, but you know, how far do your ambitions stretch, and where do you think you're going to take this brand?
So with our Canadian expansion, one of the things that we really, really want to get right is as we scale into additional stores, we want to be able to lay the infrastructure to be able to support those stores and ensure that the same customer experience that exists for our digital customers is seamless and feels just as good if they purchase online. And I know that a lot of the focus when we open stores is on the actual retail storefront itself, but a lot goes into even just logistically and supply chain and having a remote team being able to activate that store. So a lot of thought and planning and infrastructure is being built as a part of this process, and we want to get it right. We don't want it to impact the customer experience, and we're very, very excited and confident that our plans will play out and we'll be successful in activating these 15 stores over the next 10 months. And if, you know, like getting it right domestically in a short period of time goes as planned, I think for us, we're very excited about just even growing out of our domestic market. And you mentioned Aritzia. I think their Chicago store, I think it took a long while for them to get the infrastructure and distribution to be set up in those markets. So we do want to take it methodically as we grow, and we want to make sure we get it right in our domestic markets. But I think as I look ahead for many years, I do believe that there is a pathway to growth for Silk and Snow that includes both the Canadian market and the U.S. market.
Well, fantastic. It's a great strategy. Get your foundation solid and then expand. There's a lot of people businesses have tried to expand a little too quick into the U.S. or vice versa, right? And they discover that supply chains aren't all the same. And so it makes a lot of sense to me. Now, people want to get in touch with you or learn more about the brand. Where do they go?
Yeah, for any customers that want to learn more about our brand, they can reach us and get more information on silkandsnow.com, or they can reach us at any of our social media platforms. We should be on all of them, and it's at Silk and Snow.
Fantastic. Are you a LinkedIn kind of guy? Can people tap you on LinkedIn if they got some ideas for you, or maybe the prospective vendors? Who knows, right?
Yeah, I love LinkedIn, and that's probably my favorite platform, but I'm terrible at responding. But I do like to be contacted, so I welcome any connections that might come on LinkedIn, but I apologize in advance if I don't reply quickly.
You're busy. So everybody out there, don't expect an instant reply. But hey, listen, Albert, thanks for making time, carving some time out for the Voice Retail Podcast. Great to catch up. Congratulations on your success, and we'll be watching this year, and which I wish you much future success. So once again, thanks for joining me on the pod.
Yeah, thanks so much, Michael, for having me on the podcast. I always enjoy this, and I appreciate you giving me the time to tell our story.
Thanks for tuning into this episode of The Voice of Retail. If you haven't already, follow on your favorite podcast platform so new episodes will land automatically each week. And be sure and check out my other retail industry media properties, the Remarkable Retail Podcast with Steve Dennis and the Global E-Commerce Leaders Podcast. I'm your host, Michael LeBlanc, Senior Retail Advisor, Keynote Speaker. If you want more content or chat, follow me on LinkedIn. Safe travels, everyone.